Aggarwal of Bristol University, UK. And it's our immense pleasure to host Professor Varinder Aggarwal for coming all the way from UK to Kanpur. So before we start this seminar, I'd like to invite Professor Gurunath, head of the Department of Chemistry, IIT Kanpur, to introduce the speaker and to say something about this first Vinod Singh lecture series.
Good evening all. It's my pleasure to actually say a few words about this Professor V.K. Singh distinguished lecture series. As we know that our colleague Professor V.K. Singh superannuated earlier in 2024, and during that time we had a small symposium in which his students, his friends, his colleagues and his family set up a fund for the Vinod K. Singh Distinguished Lecture Series, Professor Vinod K. Singh Distinguished Lecture Series. The idea of this lecture series was that this would feature speakers who present various perspectives of organic chemistry in an accessible and captivating manner. The lecture series is actually designed for a broader audience, encouraging participation from across the IIT Kanpur community, and is actually being streamed live on YouTube as we speak now. The lecture series is also expected to cater to a large number of researchers and graduate students in terms of exposure to the broad understanding of all areas of chemistry, of course, in this time with a focus on organic chemistry. And most of us know that Professor Singh has been our colleague. He's a very distinguished academician and a very well-known synthetic organic chemist. He's currently Professor Emeritus, and he has won several awards like the Padma Shri in 2014, the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize in 2004, the Vigyan Ratna Award of the Uttar Pradesh government in 2006, the J.C. Bose Fellowship in 2009, and the Samman Patra by the UP government in 2018. And he's also currently the president of the National Academy of Sciences, Allahabad. Please join me in first extending our sincerest gratitude and a heartfelt welcome to Professor Singh as he commences in enriching this journey together. It's also my immense pleasure to introduce Professor Varinder Aggarwal, who is going to deliver the inaugural lecture in the series. And I don't think there could have been a better person than him. Okay, honestly, this is from my heart. The reason is that I listened to him before. This is probably his second visit to IIT Kanpur, and when he delivered a lecture, and he's a wonderful synthetic organic chemist, and he's been at the University of Bristol since 2019. He has been honored with the Alfred Past Chair. He did his undergraduate in 1983 at the University of Cambridge, and his PhD in 1986 from the same place, working with Professor Stuart Warren. I think a lot of us can relate to that because we use that book quite often. After 2 years of postdoctoral work at Columbia University with Professor Gilbert Stock, he started his career at the University of Bath, where he rose to the rank of professor in 1987 and finally moved to Sheffield and then on to Bristol in 2000. He's an extremely well-known synthetic organic chemist. He has been recognized with several awards and honors, including a Fellow of the Royal Society. He's also been elected as a Fellow of our National Academy of Sciences, Allahabad. He'll be inducted after this lecture at this place. He's also a Fellow of the Royal Society, and he will, of course, be delivering the first Professor V.K. Singh Distinguished Lecture Series, the title being Synthesis with Boron at the Helm. It's now my pleasure to welcome Professor Aggarwal to please deliver his talk.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Gurunath, for that wonderful and generous introduction. And it is a pleasure and an honor to be here today it's a special honor to be giving this inaugural Professor Singh lecture. I've met Professor Singh a few times, most recently last week in Bhopal at the Chemical Research Society of India conference, but also a few years ago in Gothenburg in Sweden, where we enjoyed a wonderful time together. I've changed the title and I've moved distinguished up here because for me he's a very distinguished professor in chemistry. And personally, I'm in awe of what he's done and what he's achieved throughout his own career. So it's an honor for me to share this name with him. Okay, we are going to talk about synthesis in this lecture. And in organic synthesis, you take a starting material, you add a building block to it, carry out functional group interconversion, and add further building blocks until you reach a target molecule. And we, like many other people around the world, are interested in how to go from starting material into final product more effectively and more efficiently. And the way we think about doing this is to try and come up with some one-pot operations. And our idea is to exploit some of the beautiful and fundamental chemistry of boron. So our idea is to take a boronic ester and add a nucleophile to it, because this is electrophilic, it's got a vacant p orbital on boron, add a nucleophile to it that houses a leaving group attached, to form an intermediate boron-A complex that will undergo 1,2 migration, expelling the leaving group, generating a new boronic ester. And that new boronic ester can then be used again and again in an iterative manner until the final target molecule is created. And this chemistry has some resemblance to what happens in nature. Nature takes these thiol esters, carries out acylation reactions through the beautiful polyketide synthase family of enzymes, and then further functional group interconversion and chain extension many times in an iterative manner, until once again the target molecule, the polyketide family of natural products, is generated. So we have iterative chemistry in nature, we have iterative chemistry in synthesis, and I'd like to propose a new field of iteromics, because we all know that when you add omics to the end of a word, people pay attention. Like proteomics and metabolomics. Maybe it can raise the level and raise some interest in promoting this chemistry. All right, let's have a look at how we're going to realize this chemistry here. In order to do that, we need ways of introducing boron into the molecule. We then have a growth phase where we carry out the iterative chemistry. And then finally, we have a termination phase where we convert the carbon-boron bond into what we really want at the end. And you'll see the power of this chemistry when all three are combined in a complex molecule synthesis. And I'll show you a few examples of that as we go through. But let me begin by focusing on this growth phase. How do we do the chemistry shown here? Well, in order to do that, we need a reagent that is nucleophilic, has a leaving group attached, is chiral, configurationally stable, and can be obtained in both right and left-handed forms. That is quite a tall order for a single reagent. But we identified this chemistry from Dieter Hopper, who showed that carbamates could be deprotonated with strong base in the presence of a chiral diamine ligand and trapped with electrophiles in high enantioselectivity. The intermediate lithiated carbamate looked to us like a chiral organometallic with a potential leaving group attached that is configurationally stable. So the question was, could we use these Hopper lithiated carbamates in reactions with boronic esters to give homologated compounds? The answer is yes. Here's that chemistry again. And I want to begin by showing you the scope of the reaction in terms of the carbamate that can be employed. It can be a very small substituent, methyl, high yield, high enantioselectivity, and it can go all the way up to T-butyl. Again, high yield, high enantioselectivity. That shows that this chemistry tolerates the whole spectrum of steric demand, very small to very large. The chemistry tolerates some functionality, silyl ethers and alkenes, but of course, in this protocol here, it's limited by the strong base that's employed. The scope, on the other hand, of the boronic ester is much broader. Not just alkenes and silyl ethers, but now we can bring in esters, azides, and nitriles. And that shows that the boronic ester is more electrophilic than these other potential electrophiles. Now, when we have methodology, we like to apply it in synthesis. And the molecule I want to tell you about is borlomycin. Borlomycin was isolated relatively recently, 2014. And it had some interesting biological activity. It's an antibacterial agent with a unique mode of action in that it inhibited cytophore biosynthesis. Cytophores are molecules that the bacterium uses to bring iron into the cells. And it's unique to the organism, the host. We don't use that process. So it's a potential way of inhibiting this particular bacterium. At the time that we started this work, there were no total syntheses of it, and so we considered its synthesis using our lithiation borylation chemistry. In fact, we considered a disconnection here and using lithiation borylation to bring two advanced fragments together in a convergent synthesis. Fragment A contains two boronic esters that can be obtained from diboration of this homoallylic alcohol, which itself can be obtained through a simple allylboration reaction of the aldehyde with an allyl boronic ester. In fragment B, I've masked the carbonyl as an enol ether because by doing so, I can consider a disconnection across here using what's known as the Zweifel olefination, which would require this boronic ester. I'll tell you about this reaction in a minute. And this boronic ester can be built up through our iterative homologation chemistry using this set of building blocks. So let's have a look at this now in the forward direction. But before we start, let me just give you a little bit of further background because we've made a significant change. Instead of using carbamates, we're now using these triisopropyl benzoate esters, abbreviated to TIB. And the reason for that is these are slightly better leaving groups. And as molecules get bigger, there's a tendency for the boronate complex to simply fragment back. But if you've got a faster 1-2 migration, then you get higher yields. And that's what we found with these TIB esters. Furthermore, the corresponding stanates are crystalline. That allows us to make enantiomerically pure building blocks through recrystallization. That means that when we use these multiple times, we don't generate diastereomers, large, but instead we obtain single isomers. Finally, I've color-coded the carbons so that you can see where they are in the building blocks and where they need to end up in the target molecule. Okay? So, with that preamble, fasten your seatbelts as we launch what we term our assembly line synthesis. We first of all come in with a blue reagent, then one carbon homologation of chloromethyl lithium, then the enantiomeric red reagent, chloromethyl lithium again, and then finally the blue reagent. After 5 sequenced homologations, we do our first purification, and this compound was isolated 64% yield as a single diastereomer and single enantiomer. At this point, boron has done its job of facilitating that iterative chemistry, going round and round multiple times. And now we do our Zweifel olefination. That's the reaction of this lithiated enol ether with the boronic ester. And the mechanism of the Zweifel is shown here. The lithiated enol ether reacts with the boronic ester to give the intermediate boron A complex, which on treatment with iodine generates an iodonium ion, which triggers 1,2 migration to form this beta iodo boronic ester. Treatment with base, sodium methoxide, attacks boron, affects elimination across here to give the double bond, eliminating boron, because boron has done its job that we wanted it to do. That completed fragment B. Fragment B was then deprotonated and reacted with fragment A. Fragment A contains 2 borons, but this chemistry turns out to be exquisitely selective for the less hindered primary boronic ester over the secondary boronic ester. And I think one of the reasons for that is that this is a highly hindered nucleophile, a very bulky group here and a bulky group here with the bulky diamine ligand attached to it. And so it's governed by sterics, and it reacts exclusively with that primary boronic ester. And after oxidation, it's made the carbon-carbon bond. After oxidation, we get the alcohol with high diastereoselectivity. Now, from here to the end, we simply have to remove the mom groups, the silyl ether, and hydrolyze the enol ether, all of which are done using aqueous HCl, completing a 10-step synthesis of boulomycin A in high overall yield. Well, we were very happy with our synthesis. We opened the champagne. We're about to celebrate. Then when we compared the NMR of what we made with the natural product, it didn't match. And I can tell you it's very hard to put that cork back in a champagne bottle. Now, there's a problem. What's the problem? We were confident about the stereochemistry that we had incorporated. And therefore it meant that there must be a mistake in the natural product structure determination paper. But which of these 7 stereogenic centers had been misassigned? Well, that story, which I'm going to share with you now, turned out to be, if anything, more interesting than the synthesis. Because in the end, it wasn't one stereogenic center that had been misassigned, but rather 5 of the 7 stereogenic centers had been misassigned. So, let's have a look at how we address this challenging problem. The molecule can be broken down, was broken down into 2 roughly equal halves for synthesis. And you can do the same for structure determination, because these are far enough apart that they barely speak to each other. So we began by focusing on fragment A. When we looked at the NMR of the molecule, the coupling constant between these 2 protons in the natural product was 7 Hz, but in our synthetic material was 3.5 Hz. That immediately told us that that stereochemistry was almost certainly incorrect. Of course, we didn't just rely on that bit of data. We looked in the literature more broadly, and there was a general correlation to that effect. And so rather than sin, we assigned that stereochemistry as anti. And now there are 4 possible structures for fragment A. These are shown here. And what we did next was to carry out a computational study of what each of these diastereomers, what the NMR of each of these diastereomers should look like, and compared that with the literature. In doing so, we looked not only at proton-proton couplings, we also looked at NOEs. It's quite a big job, and when you compare these two, if the comparison gives you a number that's 1 in the chi-squared reduced value, that means it's identical to the natural product. So you're looking for the smallest number, and the smallest number is here, anti-anti-syn. What was interesting about our analysis, these were the 4 diastereomers, and this was the originally proposed syn-syn-syn. If you only look at proton-proton couplings, you see that there is actually very little difference between the proposed syn-syn-syn and anti-anti-syn. But when you take into account NOEs, now there's a very big difference. So our analysis was that the stereochemistry of this polyol region is anti-anti-syn. That was made through a John Antilla phosphoric acid catalyzed alloboration reaction, high yield, high diastereo, and enantioselectivity. And then we carried out a hydroxy-directed diboration reaction using, again, methodology developed by Jim Morgan. That completed fragment A. Fragment A was then coupled with fragment B and deprotected. Then, when we compare the NMR of what we made with the natural product, unfortunately, it still did not match. Now, the good news is that this region here matched almost perfectly, but this region here did not. So we had to address the polymethyl region, but that computational analysis was actually quite hard work. We wondered whether there was a quicker, faster way of addressing this region, a way that exploited our stereo-specific homologation chemistry that we had developed. Let me show you how we went about it. Here's our boronic ester. We come in, do a homologation with the blue reagent, and then 1 carbon homologation with the green reagent. And then what we did was to come in with a mixture of blue and red reagent, 7228, which gave us a 7228 mixture of diastereomers. Now, that means that when you look at the NMR and you see an integration of 72, it tells you that you're looking at the syn isomer. And when you have an integration of 28, you're looking at the anti-isomer. So now NMR integration is telling you about stereochemistry. And now you can do this one more time with another mixture to now develop a mixture of 4 diastereomers. And the numbers in black are the expected ratios that you would get if there's no matched and mismatched effects in operation. The numbers in red are what we measured. That shows that the chemistry works with perfect reagent control, no substrate control whatsoever. Now, by the way, these numbers are not chosen at random. These numbers are chosen to maximize the difference between the 4 diastereomers and to ensure that we can see the smallest minor isomer by NMR. So these are the 4 possible isomers of fragment B. That was combined with fragment A and deprotected, and now one of these molecules should be borlomycin A. We're going to hone in on carbon 21. Here's the NMR, the C13 of carbon 21, and here are the 4 peaks in the ratios that we expected. Now we compare the NMR with the natural product, and we find that the tallest one is the one that matches. So it's all syn in this region. So then we go back, we make a pure sample of all syn, combine it with fragment A, deprotect, and now everything matches with the literature. Proton NMR, carbon NMR, alpha D, all the data combined. So now we have the correct structure of baulamycin A, and highlighted in yellow are the 5 stereogenic centers that had been misassigned in the original natural product structure determination paper. When I presented this chemistry, people have asked, what is the limit of this homologation chemistry? How many sequenced homologations can we do? Well, let me show you another target, hydroxythioceranic acid, that required 16 sequenced homologations. Let me show you how we went about it. Here it is again, and it's an important molecule, being the component of the cell wall lipid of the TB bacterium. And people are developing vaccines against the TB bacterium by looking at or using this as a vector, particularly by Adrian Meenat. Once again, I've color-coded the carbon so that you can see where they are in our starting material, where they end up in our product. And now we launch our assembly line synthesis, adding these reagents one at a time, growing the carbon chain, controlling stereochemistry at every point. After 15 sequenced homologations, we then need this long chain alkyl group, and that is then the 16th sequenced homologation. But let me just tell you, this is challenging to do, because imagine you're going down this path and your homologation chemistry at this point doesn't work to 100%. Imagine it only works to 90%. It's impossible to separate the under-homologation from the over-homologation. So it's a very stressful process in my postdoc. And for his mental health, we did intermediate purification. Pause, purify, split it into 2, and then take different batches through. That enabled us to get through to here. And now from here to the end, we simply have to protect, oxidize the aromatic ring, deprotect, to give our synthesis, completed synthesis of hydroxythioceranic acid. This chemistry of building up these methyl substituents on a carbon chain enables us to address some fundamental questions about nature. Why does nature put them in? Nature goes to a lot of trouble to incorporate them and to control the stereochemistry. Why? Why does it go to all this effort to do that? Because when you look at natural products, they are replete with molecules, they're replete with methyl substituents. In some nice review articles from Reinhard Hoffmann, he suggested that the role of the methyls is to control shape, to control the conformation of the molecule. Because these methyls, when they're 1,3 related, want to avoid this destabilizing syn-pentane interaction. It's worth over 3.5 kcals per mole. And in a nice article from Dale Boger, he investigated this anti-cancer compound. This anti-cancer compound has got a recognition site for DNA here, and a warhead, an alkylating agent, on the other side. And these 2 halves are connected together by a linker. But he found that the methyl groups on this linker were not innocuous, because if one of them was removed, the activity went down almost 50-fold. No one would have thought that. But the reason for that is that the molecule is no longer in the conformation, the active conformation required for activity. reactivity. So we asked the question whether we could control the shape of molecules just with methyl substituents on their own. Because of course in nature there are many other functional groups. But can we use methyl substituents on their own to control the shape of molecules? Our analysis was that if we could generate this alternating syn anti-isomer, it would adopt a linear conformation because these methyls want to avoid the destabilizing syn-pentane interactions. And if we could generate the all-syn, this should now adopt a helical conformation, again, because the methyls want to avoid this syn-pentane interaction. And we have unique technology to be able to put molecules like this together. Let's have a look at the alternating syn-anti. In order to make that, we come in with pairs, red reagents, pairs of blue reagents. Once again, they're added sequentially one at a time, each time controlling stereochemistry, each time controlling chain. After 9 sequence homologations, we obtain this compound, 46% yield, single diastereomer, single enantiomer, and here's the X-ray structure of it. And now you can see a linear backbone with methyl H, methyl H, methyl running across the back of it. So this molecule does indeed adopt a linear conformation. What about the all-syn? Well, to make the all-syn, you have to come in with alternating red and blue reagents. Once again, they're added sequentially, one at a time, controlling chain length, controlling stereochemistry. This compound was not crystalline, but it houses a boronic ester, which can be converted into an alcohol and easily derivatized. And the paranitrobenzoate was crystalline. And here's its X-ray structure. And I've highlighted the backbone in green so that you can see this beautiful helical conformation in which the methyl groups are acting like levers, pushing and pulling the carbon chain to avoid that destabilizing syn-pentane interaction. The challenge in this chemistry is not so much controlling stereochemistry. Rather, it's controlling chain length. Imagine doing 9 sequence homologations without intermediate purification. The potential for getting a mess is really high. The potential for getting over or under homologation is really high. It would make separation, or it would make separation extremely difficult because these molecules hardly vary in polarity. When we do our analysis suggests that each homologation goes with greater than 99% fidelity. Why? How does it work as well as it does? Well, I mean, we didn't design it so that it would work like that, but it is the way, so the way we understand how it works is shown here. We use an excess of this reagent to react with a boronic ester, and we use an excess to ensure that all of this is converted into the boron A complex. That is done at -78, low temperature. Of course, that leaves behind some excess reagent. We then warm to an intermediate temperature where the excess reagent self-destructs. The 1,2 migration needs a much higher temperature to form the homologated compound. This means that the homologated compound is never generated in the presence of excess reagent. That's all gone. So you don't get over-homologation. And you don't get under-homologation because we use an excess of that reagent. So in this way, we can ensure that we get very high fidelity in each homologation reaction. And we have likened this chemistry to a molecular assembly line. And in a molecular assembly line, you take a simple reagent, simple starting material, you add a blue reagent, then a red reagent, a blue reagent. These reagents control the stereochemistry, and the stereochemistry controls the overall shape of the molecule. Now that is just a cartoon, it's an animation. It's a pretty cool animation as well. I'm very happy to tell you more about that at the end, where it came from. But one of the things that we are doing in Bristol is trying to realize this in the lab. We're trying to automate this chemistry, and we're developing, or using, I should say, robotics to enable automated synthesis of these molecules. So what I've shown you so far is how we can make molecules that contain methyl groups either on every carbon or on every other carbon. When they're on every other carbon, this class of molecules is known as the polydeoxypropionates. They're part of the family of polyketide natural products, but actually they're a very small subset of the much larger family of polyketide natural products that contain hydroxyl groups, polyhydroxyl groups. And the question we ask ourselves is, can we use our chemistry to make molecules of this sort as well? Let me show you how we went about it. If you take an alkene, you can carry out a diboration reaction, a platinum catalyzed diboration, using a chiral ligand shown here. This is chemistry that was developed by Jim Morgan. That bisboronic ester, this butenyl tib ester can be obtained with very high enantiomer and diastereoselectivity. And then one can carry out a sulfoxide lithium or sulfoxide magnesium exchange to give the homologated compound. Once again, we're seeing exclusive reaction, the primary boronic ester. Now, you've got an alkene here, similar to this, so you can iterate diboration, homologation, and now polyoxidation now gives a polyol. So this is now the method that we can use to make polyacetates. This is the methodology again. And what's interesting is that you have two steps, diboration followed by homologation, to introduce two borons. That means that it's effectively one step for one hydroxyl group. If you compare that with the state of the art of making these compounds, to make each one requires 3 steps per hydroxyl group: an allylation followed by protection, ozonolysis to release the carbonyl. Whether you start from the aldehyde or use the beautiful chemistry from Mike Crochet involving the alcohol, doesn't matter. The state-of-the-art methodology requires 3 steps per hydroxyl group. Our methodology requires 1 step per hydroxyl group. It's a step change in chemical efficiency. So here it is again, to make these 1,3 polyols. Now, if instead of diboration, you do hydroboration followed by homologation, now you can iterate this as well and use this to make 1,5 polyols. And the methodology for making 1,5 polyols was much less well developed. So here's a method now for addressing this issue as well. And we chose as a target molecule bistimolide B. We chose that because it's one of the most complex molecules that contain 6 1,5 diols together with a set of 1,3, 2 sets of 1,3 alcohols. And we considered a disconnection across this carbon-carbon bond, which could then be made through a hydroboration Suzuki coupling at the end, and then a disconnection here to go back to 2 roughly equal fragments, fragment A and fragment B. So it's once again a convergent synthesis. But more importantly, after doing the lithiation borylation, it would generate a boronic ester that would then be converted into the alcohol that's then suitably positioned and unprotected to couple it with the acid. So we don't have lots of protection and deprotection steps to carry out the synthesis. So let's have a look at, first of all, fragment B. And here we'll have a range. We've got 1,3 and 1,5 and 1,5 again alcohols. So we start off with diboration, homologation, because we've got a 1,3. Hydroboration and homologation because we've got 1,5. Diboration, homologation because we've got 1,3. Each of those stereoisomers are controlled. They're controlled independently based on the stereochemistry of the building block and the ligand that is employed. Finally, oxidation and Salal protection gives fragment B as required. For fragment A, now we're exploiting the fact that our chemistry tolerates the whole spectrum of steric demand, because we needed a T-butyl group. And so the lithiation borylation chemistry was employed to control the stereochemistry here, good yield and high non-selectivity. Now we do our iteromic chemistry, our sequenced homologation, hydroboration, homologation, hydroboration, homologation, to build that carbon chain with full stereo control. Oxidation, protection, and finally hydroboration completes fragment A. Fragment A was then coupled with fragment B and oxidized to give the whole chain that is required. So now from here to the end, we simply have to couple the hydroxyl group with the acid, hydroboration of the alkene, and palladium catalyzed Suzuki cross coupling makes this carbon-carbon bond, completing the synthesis of bistimolide B in just 15 steps with full stereo control. When we compared the NMR, what we made with the natural product, you know what's coming. This time, it matched perfectly. All right. So why did I raise that possibility? We did something unusual, because actually, if your NMR, and it's a complicated NMR, matches the natural product, you would stop. But what we did is we analyzed the NMR fully. We assigned every proton and every carbon. We did it independently of what was in the literature. And we were surprised to find that more than 50% of the assignments in the literature in the natural product structure determination paper were incorrect. How then did they get the right structure if their assignments are not right? Well, they got the right structure because bistimolide B was assigned by analogy with bistimolide A, which is just a different lactone connected through a different hydroxyl group. And there was an X-ray structure of that. So, because of that, they were able to assign that. And I think they were lazy when they were doing the assignments. But that's being a little bit harsh because it's difficult. You've got lots of signals that are very similar to each other. It's hard to pull them apart, but we were able to pull them apart. You can ask at the end why we did that, if you want. But it made us think about the other members of this class of natural products. For example, the kaolobalites. Were these correct? I mean, there was only partial structure for kaolobalide A. Let's focus in on kaolobalide A. Here's kaolobalide A. Here's the proposed structure of it. There are 8 unassigned stereocenters, which means there are 256 possible diastereoisomers. Now, if the structure of these is incorrect, and you'll see why I'm saying that in a minute, then there are 4,096 isomers. And if the position of the triol is incorrect, because it could be here, it could be in this part of this, 1, 5, or here, and so on. There are 7 other positions for that triol. There are over 28,000 isomers. This is a problem of Everestian proportions. There are almost as many isomers as there are feet to the summit of Mount Everest. Can we climb Mount Everest? Well, we managed to get a sample of kaolobalide A. And our analysis was that the triol is not here, but rather is positioned between 17 and 21. That takes us now down to 4,096 isomers. We then derivatized the polyol and made the Moshe's ester and carried out full NMR analysis and were able to assign every alcohol stereochemistry based on the Moshe's ester analysis. We are now down to 8 possible isomers. That is doable through synthesis. And we envisaged a synthesis operation in which we do lithiation borylation, lithiation borylation, lithiation borylation with these 4 fragments to assemble the final target molecule. Fragment 1 was first of all put together. And what I'm showing you here are the 2 possible diastereomers for fragment 1. They had a really interesting NMR. If you look at the CH2 between the methyl and OH, they're very different in one diastereomer, whereas in the syn isomer, they're virtually on top of each other. In the natural product, they are very different, almost half a ppm apart. That immediately told us that it's going to be the syn isomer, sorry, it's going to be the anti-isomer, not the syn isomer. So now we're down to 4 potential isomers. So here we are with the anti-isomer for fragment 1. That was then coupled through a lithiation borylation with fragment 2, making that carbon-carbon bond in high yield. This combined fragment 1 and 2 was then deprotonated here, reacted with fragment 3. Once again, it reacts exclusively on the primary boronic ester, making this carbon-carbon bond, controlling the stereochemistry that we want here, again in good yield. The final coupling with fragment 4, what we did is we used our mixture method again, a 2-to-1 mixture, a known mixture. so that we could use NMR integration to determine stereochemistry. I'm just showing you the major diastereomer. This was then ozonized, oxidized the acid, macrolactonized, and deprotected to give the final target molecule. And the major component of the mixture matched the natural product. So now, out of over 28,000 isomers, we have identified the correct stereochemistry for K-lobalide A. And the total synthesis was achieved in 16 linear steps at just over 5% overall yield. In the last few minutes, I want to just talk about these polyboronic esters, because these looked interesting to us. These looked interesting. So far, what we've done with these polyboronic esters is oxidize them to alcohols. The beauty of boron is that you're not limited to that. There are so many homologations, functionalizations you can do with boron. For example, we took this polyboronic ester, we carried out a Zweifel olefination with this lithiated enol ether. The mechanism is shown here. And the reason that we use this particular alkenyl lithium is because the product can then be treated with base to give an alkyne. And you can do this in a parallel way with each of those boronic esters with full stereospecificity. And of course, polyalkynes can be used in polyclick reactions to give, if you use this particular azide, housing a sugar gives this polysaccharide, which has some resemblance to the surface of a cell, which uses polysaccharides for recognition purposes. You can convert the boronic ester into an aromatic group, for example, using fluoryl lithium. It forms a boronate complex, addition of N-bromosuccinimide, brominates the ring, triggers 1,2 migration, followed by elimination, re-aromatizing the ring. Again, that can be done at each of these boronic esters. And finally, here's now a molecule with 8 boronic esters. And again, you can do this poly-Zweifel olefination with this terminal alkene. And the reason we were interested in doing this was because you can then do a poly-Grubbs metathesis to generate a polycyclic substrate. Tell you the truth, I don't know what we can do with these molecules. I think they're interesting. It's interesting to be able to do multiple sequenced transformations with each of these borons. And one of the reasons I am presenting it here is to invite other people to come forward and say, oh, maybe you could do this. Because we're looking for potential applications. Before we finish with this, let's just interrogate this Grubbs metathesis. What's going on here? Does the catalyst attack here and then zip up through that each alkene? Or does it go in the middle and do one at a time? Well, there's a very nice paper by Bob Grubbs in which he suggests that the catalyst reacts, but leaves some mistakes within the polymer chain. And then it comes back and repairs these mistakes through forming the carbene, reacting with the adjacent carbon until it meets another mistake, and then it forms the ring. And he likened this to the DNA system of DNA repair enzyme, in which the enzyme does the chemistry, and then there are DNA repair enzymes that that sort out the mistakes that are created. I have to say, this is one of my favorite papers that there is. It's a beautiful paper, well worth reading. So that is the story I wanted to share with you. Story of lithiation borylation, chemistry that we've likened to a molecular assembly line. And you can also apply the same principles to a secondary carbamate to reach tertiary boronic esters with perfect enantioselectivity. And then there's a whole host of transformations you can do on these tertiary boronic esters, including some new cross-coupling reactions that we've developed. Let me close by acknowledging our support. We've had good support from our national funding agency, EPSRC, and the European Research Council, and I must acknowledge very close collaboration with Craig Buss. A lot of our work has involved highly sophisticated, detailed NMR work, and we certainly couldn't have done it without it. But the real heroes are the people who have done the chemistry. And I really want to thank them for their tremendous contributions. Their names have appeared on the slides as we've gone through, but I really want to thank the whole team. They are a tremendous group to represent. They, of course, contribute practically, but also intellectually in the development of our research programs. I've run out of time, but just the last few slides. A little bit of geography, in case you don't know where Bristol is. Bristol is directly west of London. It's a very nice, beautiful city. One of the famous landmarks in Bristol is the Clifton Suspension Bridge. It's a beautiful piece of Victorian engineering designed by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. And he won the competition aged 24 for the design of this. Amazing feat of engineering. Amazing to have that confidence at 24 to build such a structure. And it is an iconic building. It's an iconic building in Bristol. And here it is on our annual Bristol Balloon Festival that we have every year. The other important landmark is the chemistry building, which was built in 2000, just when I moved there, and is a wonderful place to live and work. So with that, let me close. Thank you once again for this great honor to be here, and thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you.
Mr. Aggarwal will be happy to answer a few queries, I hope.
Yes, of course.
The audience, somebody has. Students, I was just curious about the NMR that you showed. I thought both of them were diastereomeric protons, so they should have given a fairly high J value.
Yeah.
So why was it that in the other case you got only one peak?
Well, they can be coincident. And it just so happened that here, the diastereotopic protons were coincident. And what we are now doing is we are looking at this to see if there are some general patterns. When you have a hydroxymethyl that's 1,3 related, is there a general pattern in the databases that the syn isomer has very similar chemical shift and the anti has a very different chemical shift? Our analysis so far is that there is correlation, and we're using now machine learning to train the computer, train the algorithm to identify these systems, and then to put in some new structures and get it to predict what the stereochemistry is likely to be. And so far, this looks pretty good. We've done that with baulamycin. So we put in the structure of baulamycin, and it predicted the correct stereochemistry of all 7 stereogenic centers into this computer program. We think it's going to be a powerful method in the future for structure determination. I mean, we're not really a structure determination group, but because I work really closely with this NMR person, we've really combined our efforts and really taken it to a new level, I think.
Just one other curious question before I pass it on to the audience. You did the fragmentation analysis for the disconnection approach in a certain way for your last molecule, that is your...
Right.
I was just curious if other fractions would give you, fragmentations would give you a shorter number of steps. Because I thought it's one of the one that you used probably gave a more number of steps.
Well, the thing is...
So did I miss a trick there?
Yeah. You know, when you do total synthesis, you can count the number of steps by longest linear sequence or total number of steps. And actually, by breaking it down into 4 fragments, you actually reduce the longest linear sequence, all right? Because let's say each fragment is made in, let's say each fragment is made in 3 steps or 4 steps, then it's really quite a short synthesis when you then combine, do the fragment coupling.
Audience, any other questions? Students?
Yes, very beautiful talks, and I'm very interested. And regarding the determination of stereochemistry of natural product, several years ago, Japanese researcher Makoto Fujita proposed the X-ray method, sponge method.
Yeah. Fujita.
Yeah. So I'm just, but at that time, too much advertisement. But I don't know how they developed recently. But what do you think about such a method for determining the X-ray structure of stereochemistry of this stuff?
All right. What you may not know about is that there is some beautiful chemistry from Fujita, where he takes these moth-type species and he can complex into these natural products, even oils, and they crystallize within the moth. And then you can take the X-ray crystal structure of that. I think that is Nobel Prize winning chemistry. But at the moment, it doesn't seem that many people do it. What I've heard is it's actually quite difficult to do. He's got the technology, he knows how to do it, his lab knows how to do it, but the translation to other labs, I think, is still challenging. We would love to do it. We would love to do it. But we don't do the natural product isolation. If we did, we would put every one of those natural products into the moth and get the X-ray structure, and there'd be no problem. But it's still a challenge. It's still a challenge.
Yeah.
Professor Aggarwal, beautiful chemistry. So my question is relevant to the organometallic reagent which you use. Say, for example, the secondary lithium or the tertiary lithium. I understand the chemistry has a lot more control in terms of the stereochemical outcome of the product. I would wonder, in case if your group started to look at the possibility of starting from the secondary halides or the tertiary halides and do some sort of a photocatalytic radical generation, which would in turn actually couple with the metal to generate this metal carbon bond and subsequently treat with the boron to make the 8 complex. And once you get the 8 complex, your group already established how to go from one to another to another. So in this way, you would avoid using this lithium reagents.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully understood it, but you know, a lot of the photochemistry is radical in nature, and so it's difficult to control stereochemistry. So there's a challenge there, and there's a challenge for people working in photo redox chemistry to develop more and more systems where you can control the stereochemistry of either boronate formation or of the particular carbon-boron bond that you're interested in. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. This is in our borlomycin synthesis, where is this what you mean? Where where we come in with different ratios of red and blue reagents in these two steps. And the reason that we're generating this mixture is because we get 4 diastereomers in which the NMR integration is essentially a signature of stereochemistry. So when we see an integration of 0.46, it tells us that we have syn stereochemistry. If we see an integration of 0.1, it tells us that it's syn anti. So the integration is simple integration of the NMR is telling us what the stereochemistry is. And it's because these reactions go with 100% stereospecificity. So it's not affected by the pre-existing stereochemistry. It's only determined by the stereochemistry of the reagent.
Further question?
Wow.
Maybe you can come this way so that
Okay. Oh, yeah. We could do it. It will. It'll
Can the projector be put off?
it'll come out fine because it's coming behind us. Wow, it's beautiful. Oh, gosh.
All tie with a coupling set on behalf of the department.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Just stay there, stay there.
Thank you, Professor Gurunath. Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute honor to welcome you all to this special occasion of the induction of Professor Varinder K. Aggarwal, Fellow of the Royal Society and Professor at the University of Bristol, UK, as a Foreign Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, India. I now invite Professor Vinod Kumar Singh, President of the National Academy of Sciences, India, and Institute Chair Professor at IIT Kanpur to commence the induction ceremony.
As Namrata mentioned, Professor Varinder Aggarwal was elected Foreign Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences. He was not able to come last year in December to the annual session and symposium in Bhopal. So we decided to induct him here at IIT Kanpur. For this purpose, Dr. Santosh Shukla, Executive Secretary of NASI, came from Prayagraj.
As sir told that the National Academy of Sciences, the oldest science academy of this country, was founded in 1930 by the great patriotic scientist Professor Meghnad Saha. And from the inception of the academy since 1930, the academy has so many works for the cultivation and promotion of the science and technology in all its branches through many of the works with the help of their fellows and members. And in this area, the academy acknowledged the outstanding contribution of the scientists by giving the fellowship as a FNSC for the Indian fellows as well as the foreign fellow also. We are thankful to the Professor V.K. Singh sir, who has invited here, and to the Professor Aggarwal sir as a foreign fellow to induct this. I want to read the citation. The National Academy of Sciences, India, Dr. V.K. Aggarwal, School of Chemistry, Bristol University, UK, has been elected Foreign Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, India in the year 2024 for his pioneer work involving organic synthesis. We congratulate you and request sir to kindly present.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I request with this certificate, sir, kindly we have a photograph with the sir.
Are you in this as well?
Yeah, yes. Sir, there is also a customary for signing on the fellow register of our academy. We humbly request you to kindly sign on the fellow register. This is one badge, sir, which we provide to sir. I see that this.
Is it 2020?
Yes, sir. 4.
Great.
Small clip.
All right.
Well, you can keep it.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that later. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Can I say a few words?
Yeah, sure.
I've got a mic. Yeah. Just a few words from me to express my thanks, and I am deeply honored to have been elected a fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, India. To be a fellow of this National Academy is a truly great honor, which my parents and their forefathers would be exceptionally proud of, with all of us having grown up in small villages in India. My mother stopped schooling at 13 years of age to look after her family when my grandmother became ill. And as a further indication of our background, after she got married, she had to actually carry water from the well to bring it home. They could never have imagined that one day their son would be standing here, elected a fellow of the National Academy. But that is what education can offer. It opens doors and provides new opportunities. And I want to thank my parents for their sacrifices in prioritizing education for the sake of their children. I want to thank my wife, who's actually listening in, I think, from London, for her support, and our two boys, who provided us with a wonderful family life. I want to thank my amazing research group, chemistry I've talked about today, who've contributed so much, not just practically, but also intellectually, to our success. Finally, I want to thank Professor Vinod Singh for his own support and also for his wonderful friendship. I'm looking forward to sharing a glass of whiskey with him later to celebrate this very special occasion, which is very dear to my heart. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I now request Professor V.K. Singh to please present a bouquet to our honoree, Professor Varinder Aggarwal. Can we have?
Done that.
I'm really sorry.
We've done that.
Okay, thank you, Professor Singh. And as we continue this evening's celebration, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Santosh Shukla, Executive Secretary of National Academy of Sciences, India. And now I invite Professor V.K. Singh again to lead the Felicitation program of Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Fellow of the Academy and recipient of Padma Shri 2025.
Today we had, hello. Hello. This is the third function we are going to have today. And Dr. Santosh Shukla came from Prayagraj only for the function. You know, it's a very special evening. On behalf of the National Academy of Sciences, India, all fellows of IIT Kanpur, and on behalf of the institute, I like to congratulate Professor Ashutosh Sharma, a colleague, friend, and co-brother, which you will realize little while, on being selected for the Padma Shri 2025 for his distinguished service in the field of nanoscience and nanotechnology. We also congratulate his wife Neeti, who is among us here today. Padma Shri is the fourth highest civilian honor given by the government of India. We all are proud of Ashutosh for bringing this laurel to the institute and achieving this recognition. Ashutosh is a professor of chemical engineering. He joined the institute in 1990, the same time I joined. He is best known for pioneering research in colloids, thin film, interfaces, adhesion, patterning, and the fabrication and application of self-assembled nanostructures. He is very well recognized, achieving several awards and honors, including Shansarup Bhatnagar Prize, TWAS Prize, and Infosys Prize. He is elected a fellow of all the science academies of the country, INAE, and the TWAS, the World Academy of Sciences. In addition to contributing to academia, he contributed a lot to science policy as a secretary, DST Government of India. His leadership in the government has been instrumental in launching several national research, innovation, and entrepreneurship initiatives. He is currently the president of Indian National Science Academy, and that is why I said he's a co-brother. As a president of the National Academy of Sciences, India, it is my honor to felicitate Ashutosh and Neeti. So I would like Ashutosh.
I now invite Dr. Ritika Gautam to please present a bouquet to Mrs. Neeti Sharma. Thank you, Professor Singh, Dr. Shukla, and Dr. Ritika. I now welcome Professor Ashutosh Sharma to address the gathering.
Before, sir, your address, sir, I request Ashutosh Sharma, sir. If, sir, you have not signed on our fellow register in your earlier, we can request you, sir. Professor Sharma, sir, has been elected as the NASI fellow in 2006, sir. But I could not find his induction signature in that one, sir. Even any other fellows of the academy are here. If they have not been signed, we can. Sir. Thank you very much, sir. 2006, sir. 2006. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Sorry for interruption.
Well, of course, clearly NASI is the toughest academy to get in because that was the last one that I got, 2006, he told me. And I think the Bangalore one is the easiest because that must have been 97 or something much before that. So indeed, it's a great pleasure for me to be here and saying a few words to my friends, to my colleagues. They're all from chemistry, right? But anyway, chemistry, of course, they have the right chemistry. And, led by Professor Vinod Singh, who has pointed out is my co-brother. So actually, you think about it, there are 3 academies of sciences in the country. And all 3 have very strong connection with IIT Kanpur currently. So there are 2 of us, NASI and INSA. And then one of my batchmates and also a dear friend, Varadrajan, is the president of the 3rd Academy in Bangalore. So indeed, and of course, 2 of them, they belong to chemistry, and I'm a chemical engineer. So not quite equal to chemistry, but still in the running. Now, just before coming here, I got a little bit delayed and I missed some part of your lecture. That's because there was a INSA meeting going on. In particular, the Young Academy, which is part of INSA, called INYAS. Any members of INYAS here? Yeah, there's, okay, past members, very good. So I had to give, a 3rd time over, I was the chief guest for their GBM. And so I called it cheap guest, because it's cheap guest because you get them free. Okay, totally cheap. And I said, look, at least it's a Valentine's Day today. You should at least send me flowers. But I am so glad that, Vinod Singh made up for that, and I won't have to. I got lots of flowers for my Valentine. So that is indeed great. So IIT Kanpur, I would conclude by saying, of course, that I'm very, very grateful to IIT Kanpur and to my department and the friends. Some of them are here from chemical engineering and chemistry. Chemistry is the best, of course, because they can solve every problem, because they have all the solutions in the lab. This is the 3rd time I'm trying this joke. This joke was generated by ChatGPT, so it's getting pretty good, very good, in fact. So what I was saying is, so INEAS people, they were asking me, how did you feel after getting the Padma award? So I recalled my feeling. I said I was not feeling bad. I was not feeling depressed. I was not unhappy, for sure. That may happen later. But, I think the basic point in having some recognition is basically to know that this is not individual. Okay, so let's say in 2013, we celebrated Professor Maninder Aggarwal's Padma Shri. In 2014, we celebrated Dr. Vinod Singh's Padma Shri. In 2020, H.C. Verma's Padma Shri. And so when you get something, some recognition, it's a recognition for other people who have been associated with you to feel little happy. You know, your co-workers and your students and your friends, sometimes even your enemies, a little bit. Okay, I mean, I'll tell you why. They say, hey, if this stupid guy can get it, so can I. So there's always some aspirational value, attached with it. So I think this is good. This is the only function of recognition is basically that. I mean, for your family or friends to feel little, have some happy, positive vibes, and then they can ask for a party, for sure. Right? That's fantastic. And sir, thank you. I mean, congratulations to you for, signing up the register here. I do recall going to Allahabad and signing this register sometime. So either, only three possibilities. Huh? Either I'm very forgetful, or I'm a liar, or your records are not up to date. Okay. I think there's no fourth possibility here. And I so recall sitting over here when people were signing up things. And in fact, I recall sitting next to an Oxford or Cambridge professor who, like Professor Aggarwal, was inducted as, international fellow. But never mind, I don't charge for signing. So this is free. Okay, I mean, I signed it again, no problem there. So fantastic. And I want to thank all of you who are still here, and that hopefully that you would get something in return for this. And I'm very thankful to Professor Vinod Singh, a true friend, a true chemist, a very distinguished chemist, if you would, and for organizing this. I feel really good about it. Thank you very much. You want me to say anything else? No, sir, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sharma, for your inspiring words. As we conclude this evening celebration, let's once again congratulate all our esteemed honorees and express our gratitude to everyone who made this event possible. Thank you all for joining us, and I wish you all a pleasant evening ahead. Thank you.